Staff, Arizona, and I represent the Greater Flagstaff Forest Partnership, which is a not-for-profit here in Flag. It's been around since 1996, so a really long time. And I'm one of the co-chairs of the Wood Utilization Community of Practice. And I'm going to go around and let folks introduce themselves, and I'll call you out as I see you on the screen. I'm going to skip Becca because she might be on the phone, and we'll move over to Katie. Katie, are you there? Okay, we'll move over to Molly.
Can you hear me?
There you are. Hi, Katie.
Yeah, I was having technical problems. So Katie Harrell here. I'm with the Joint Institute for Wood Products Innovation, which is an advisory committee to the Board of Forestry and Fire Protection in California.
Oh, wonderful. Great to have you, Katie. And Molly.
Good morning. I'm Molly Pitts. I serve as the Executive Director for the Colorado Timber Industry Association.
Good to see you, Molly. Molly and I worked together when she lived here in Arizona, so it's nice to see Molly again. And we worked on utilization issues. So, and Magdalena.
Hi there, I'm Magdalena Valderrama. I'm in Lake County, California, the northern part of the state, with the Spatial Springs Community Redevelopment Association, and we're helping our community recover from wildfires. So we've got a lot of things to use wood for.
Great, thank you, Magdalena. And Paul.
Hey there, I'm Paul Tedderton with the Nature Conservancy. Sorry for being a few minutes late here.
Good to see you, Paul. And Paul's here in Flagstaff. And Ashley.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley Woolman. I work for Colorado State Forest Service. My position is brand new to our agency as the Forest Carbon Specialist, and Tim Reeder in our agency passed along this meeting invite. So happy to be here.
Well, nice to have you, Ashley. Maybe we'll have you at some point, talk more about your position on one of our calls.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's see. To Jill.
Hi, I'm Jill Beckman. I'm a assistant professor of practice and the Centennial Forest Management manager here at the NAU School of Forestry in Flagstaff.
Great, thank you, Jill. And Jaden.
Morning, y'all. My name's Jaden Peterson. I'm a forest ecologist with SWCA, and I'm based in Nevada.
Thank you. And Xander.
Good morning. I'm a forester with the Watershed Research and Training Center in Trinity County, California.
Thank you, Xander. And Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Santa Cruz with Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization. I'm the Mitigation Program Manager.
Good to see you again, Jessica. I just saw her in New Jersey at our annual workshop, or met you, actually. So nice to see you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you too. Thanks for the invite.
You bet. And Eitan.
Hi, everyone. Eitan Krasilevsky with the Forest Stewards Guild. I'm here in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Good to see you, Eitan. And Joel.
Hi, good morning. Joel Jurgens with Nature Conservancy based in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Morning, Joel.
Good morning.
Great. And Becca, are you available to introduce yourself? There she is.
I am. Hi, Becca Samolsky with Fire Adapted Colorado in the southwestern corner of Colorado.
Thanks, Becca. And we're going to hand it over to Jeff Ravage, and we're really happy to have him today and really appreciate, Jeff, your time. And Jeff's going to talk about reduced emissions from wildfire, and I believe it's a carbon offset protocol. So Jeff, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and you can take it from here.
Okay. Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Making sure because my headset. tends to fail at the most critical junctures. So I am the North Fork Watershed Coordinator for Coalition for the Upper South Platte, a small ecological restoration place-based organization here in Central Colorado. And I am now also the Chief Science Officer for Coalitions and Collaboratives, a nationwide organization that helps develop and grants, mitigation grants currently to small place-based nonprofits. The work that we've done with carbon offsets began about 7 years ago and was done all through touch. And finally, at the end, Coco came in and contributed some money because it's been a long path. You'll see also that I've had to use the climate action reserves PowerPoint to present it. So I just didn't have time with the field season right now to stack up a new one. So it's as long as the journey it's been to get this protocol out to the public, it's a death by PowerPoint. So I'm going to try and go through it as quickly as possible. They just love their slides, and I've been kind of like pulling them a little bit so I don't blow your brains out. But the original source of this came from a Wood Innovation grant that John Bruno applied for while Carol Icarius was executive director at Tusk. And we basically stepped way out on a limb and said, yeah, we'll write some carbon offset protocols for Wood Innovation grants. We'll write one for biomass replacement of fossil fuels, and we'll write one for quantifying the emissions created by wildfires so that we can use it to help aid funding for mitigation. And while we're still working on the biomass replacement, we have found a home for, found partners for, joined in on a team that's been spearheaded by Spatial Informatics Group in California. And yeah, so we've been working on this protocol with them for 7 years. I've been on the science development team. Preston has been a funder, and we're really proud that we finally have this protocol that allows us to quantify the emission reductions of mitigation on wildfire behavior, and therefore quantify the amount of carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere, the reduction of that carbon dioxide, and turn it into forecasted mitigation units, which are very similar to CRTs, which you might be aware of, which are carbon reduced tons. They're the same thing in terms of reduced tons of carbon. The reason they're called FMUs is because this is what's called an ex ante protocol, which means that you can create your project, you can quantify it, you can create your units and sell them before you actually begin the mitigation, which makes it a useful tool for funding mitigation, because you really need the money beforehand, not afterwards, and waiting 40 years to quantify the reduction of greenhouse gases is not doing anyone any good in terms of functionally moving forward with more mitigation. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go to protocol, and I'm going to start the slideshow, hopefully from the beginning. Yes. Can you guys see this?
Yes, we can, Jeff.
Do you see it full screen, or do you see the split screen?
Split screen.
Okay, because this is always an issue. Appreciate slide. And you've seen it full screen.
Yep. Perfect.
That's what we want. Hi, welcome to the Climate Board Reduced Emissions for Mega Fires Forecast Methodology Version 1 Overview webinar. I believe that this webinar was May 9th, 2023. This one was from Carbon World in California, this May. So this is the latest and greatest version of the PowerPoint. So we're going to do an introduction. We're going to go over the reduced emissions from megafire forecast methodology, and then we'll get questions. So we'll do a little bit of climate action reserve is a regulatory quality standard setting carbon generate. It creates carbon credits. They're publicly accessible. They do create both CRTs and FMU. So CRTs are the more regulatory. They are the gold standard. They're absolutely real. There's not any question about them unless you read the Guardian article about some of the work that's been done by some of the. I'm not going to go into who it was, but there's some carbon offset regulatory agencies and registries that have created carbon offset credits that aren't quite that valuable, and it's kind of hurting the whole industry. But these people are fully standard and fully authorized to produce carbon credits. The Climate Forward program is a little different. Climate Forward is a little softer, but it creates carbon credits for more unique and cutting edge programs, such as the reduced emissions from megafires. It will probably be several years of development and trials on the ground before we can really meet the criteria necessary to create actual carbon offset credits. So that's why we're using a different program within there to create forecasted mitigation units. And so you can see here, we issue FMUs. It does follow all greenhouse protocols for accounting standards. It is top of the line protocol, and it is a top of the line registry. The Climate Forward registry has expanded the scope and scale of carbon project types by creating this Climate Forward. And they do also, as a registry, they track the ownership, they track the project activities, they verify that everything is real and that everything occurs as is designed and promised. So you can see I'm kind of going over this a little bit. So offset carbon reserve tons is equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide emissions of achieved either reductions or removals. Right now, most PRTs that are on the market are reductions. Very few of them are removals, but the only removals are the improved forest management has a reforestation module on it. So if you're growing a new forest, you're actually removing it. And this is where other registrars have got into a lot of fuzzy math and got caught in it. Whereas forecasted mitigation units equals 1 ton of CO2 equivalent of anticipated reductions in units. And what a CO2 equivalent means is we're looking not only at CO2, we're looking at methane, we're looking at fluorocarbons, and we look at what they would be. The standardized unit is carbon dioxide, but as you probably know, methane is up to 50 times more devastating in terms of warming potential than a ton of carbon dioxide. So that's taken into account in the calculations. And when you're dealing with fire, you are dealing with methane as well as carbon dioxide. So the groups that have really put this together are the Spatial Informatics Group, Thomas Buchholz has been behind the initial science, Climate Action Reserve, Dogwood Springs Forestry, Coalition for the Upper South Platte, and the South Platte, excuse me, and Carbonomics. So this is the core group that's been developing this for the final part of this protocol. There are other work group members, and the work group members were responsible for basically reviewing, analyzing, studying it, and telling us we're wrong, which is a very important and vital role when you're creating a carbon offset protocol, as in any scientific endeavor. So these are people who help pay for this, and it has been a rather expensive development project. You see SMUD, which is the it's the utility, the large utility in California, the U.S. Forest Service, the Spatial County Air Pollution Control District, and Bruce Springsteen, I just love using his name, who works at Spatial County, has also been essential in designing some of the science that this was based on. Cal Fire has been a big contributor, Coalition for the Upper South Platte, and Sierra Pacific Industries. So why do we want to address wildfire emissions? I think that everybody on this call already knows that, but this is designed for a more broader audience. We can just go over these graphs, which basically shows that, you know, we are still on an upward trend with the end of this graph of more acres burning every year and more acres burning at high severity. And the amount down here, I don't know if it's covered by us like it is by me, but in the eco region, we're looking at the tons that are released. My calculations are sitting on my whiteboard in front of me, tell me that in the event of a catastrophic wildfire in a montane forest, such as ours here in California, we can expect about 45.5 tons of carbon dioxide to be emitted per acre during a severe fire event. But over the next 10 to 15 years, we will expect 167 tons of carbon dioxide to be released per acre because of the death and decay that is caused by that fire. So it's a significant amount, it's a significant carbon source. And as we all know, mitigation gives us the potential to reduce that carbon source. And then, of course, the reforestation would give us the chance to create a carbon sink. And if you're unaware of carbon sources and carbon sinks, ask me at the end of this. So let's get into the methodology. This methodology accounts for emission reductions associated with fuel treatment activities that modify the behavior of wildfires and reduce their severity and extent. It establishes the eligibility rules to calculate these, and it provides guidance and independent confirmation of the projects that are created. So eligibility, we'll see it right now is set to Western United States, although we want to expand this to cover the entire CONUS. We'll cover up the start date. Actually, you know what? I know all of this is covered. The slides that are coming. These people just love to foreshadow, and it's like, why should we do that? We want to be surprised as we go ahead. So here's the project. We can use fuel treatments such as mastication, broadcast prescribed cultural burns, thinning from below, crowd thinning, selection cut, pretty much any type of thinning mitigation, pruning or removal of surface fuels could all be projects that are eligible under this protocol. What we're looking at here on this graph is showing a graph of carbon stock on the ground and carbon carrying capacity of the forest itself. So we start at time zero when we have cut and thinned, and then over time the forest grows, and then it burns and it releases and does the same thing as doing thin, and then it starts the cycle all over again. So this is the unstable cycle in front, which is either which I think is the natural cycle, just melt and burn. And then, yeah, the back one is the stabilization of doing mitigation where you reduce the activity. Burn can still occur, but they do not devastate the vegetation. They do not change it in trajectory and cause, depending upon which species it is, more just regeneration that's out of control. So that's what we're trying to do is take a cycle, an unstable cycle, and turn it into a stable cycle by mitigating. Okay, so who can register? Any entity that has an account with them, and any entity that submits a project, and they are then responsible for reporting and confirmation. Confirmation is done by third-party bodies. That way, we know that there's not some conspiracy going on of us as project managers and them as carbon offset registrars, just in order to soak the currently voluntary carbon offset market. The general entity is responsible for the planning, the organization, and the implementation of the project. It is not required that organization be the landowner. That's kind of important, but they must have written agreements with the landowner, and those agreements must be equivalent to the length of a project. You can aggregate treatments across ownership, including across ownership types, which is which you'll see is a very good thing. Eligibility right now, as I said, it's just the Western United States, private public lands. The U.S. Forest Service is still in their decision-making process of what they want to do with carbon, and they're still in the decision-making process of what they want to do with this protocol, but they've been very interested in it. And this protocol is part of the discussions, I'm told, at the top level on their carbon world outlook, which we should know in a year and a half or so. It may be in places where prior projects took place, but it will be subject to quantification of net benefit adjustments. So if you do an REM project and then you go back in the same area and improve it and create it, you can still do it, but it's going to change how it's done, and you'll see later where that would be, because it's going to be altered by prior treatments, and it's going to be altered by any ongoing activities or disturbances. But here's the important thing: it may be in locations where other carbons exist, including stacked with an improved forest management project, which means that if you go in post treatment, or say your project burns, which is always a possibility, or maybe your project is a burn, then you could potentially go in and replant in areas that are thin and begin calculating it as a carbon sink for reforestation. There are also other protocols that are in the works that are made to click into this. So stay tuned. It's designed to be a modular protocol, so it can be used in conjunction with a wide variety of other protocols without overlapping and without dreaded double counting. So project start dates can be anything prior to March 8, 2022. So we're past that. So anytime you wanted to start, there's a valid start. The project listing deadline must be within 1 year of a project start date, but often we would want to start it before we actually even start cutting trees. I guess down here they do have a start dates prior to the release of the methodology, maybe submitted up to 1 year after methodology release. That's with the registrar. So I don't see that really actually being a problem anymore. The length of crediting for this project. So one carbon project for the reduced emissions for wildfire is 40 years. So any contracts you have with landowners, any modeling, any land use has to be locked for 40 years. Like I said, we can put in other protocols. We can still do management in there, But this has been an issue here in Colorado on state state land board land, and they're not certain that they want to sign over usage of their land for 40 years or 100 years, depending upon the protocol. We've been working with them on trying to do reforestation on large patches of severely burned forests that are on their lands, where we would be able to use carbon offset protocols to pay for the whole thing. And they're still considering it because it requires a change in the land use for that amount of time. And in their use, a lot of it is grazing. And of course, if you're going to go in and reseed and replant 1,000 acres of burned territory, you really don't want cows going in and eating all your seedlings. So we're still in talks with them on that, but that's the crediting period. So in terms of a project, we have to make sure that there's some mechanism to show stability over that time period. Okay, so these are the performance standards are going to actually go into that deeper. So this is additionality. We'll get into additional, but most carbon offset protocols have this standard of additionality. And it was started by the UN saying because they wanted to increase the amount of projects that are being done to reduce emissions and to sequester carbon dioxide. So they created this thing of additionality saying you have to prove that your project would not be done under the status quo. But the status quo is rapidly changing, and we are paying more attention to carbon in the atmosphere, at least a lot of us. So those standards, the additionality is going to be, I predict, is going to be changing because the ability to prove that you're additional to the status quo is going to become a little softer. But the legal requirement test is the project activities must not be legally required. So if you're like required by, say, Jefferson County here in Colorado to mitigate your property in order to build a new house there, you could not use this protocol. And you must, as project proponents, sign a legal attestation that you can, that you are legally clear and that you are additional. Existing laws that provide basic environmental and social safeguards must be followed. That seems to be a no-brainer, but there it is. And then it must, all the projects must comply with regulations. So while we've been hearing a lot from like Sierra Pacific, they want to use these projects for clear cuts. They can do that on their own property, but it's going to change things if they go onto somebody else's because legally most areas don't want to see clear cuts. That's actually not a great example, but it's an example. So ownership, you have to prove ownership. Like I said, you don't have to be the owner to create this project, but you have to have contracts with the landowner or the forest owner in order to do it. Double counting is a big thing in carbon offset protocols. You cannot create credits and then use math in order to double them. So you can't say apply for California tax credits for doing a mitigation project and then also create a reduced emissions for wildfire project on it because you're basically selling those greenhouse credits twice. And it's up to the registrar and the compliance officer to make sure this doesn't happen, but you're going to have to attest that you're not going to do it And if you do it, you will face steep penalties from both sides because it's really a no-no. There's enough wariness of carbon offset protocols in general that we really have to police any hanky-panky that some people would want to do. So nobody on this call, obviously. Let's talk about the project area. The project area, and this is something that is very unique about this protocol, consists of both treatment areas and non-treatment areas. The project area may comprise multiple ownership types, and it is established by creation of a buffer around the treated area based upon professional judgment. It's also kind of based upon what the computer is going to tell us. Any of you have done any fire modeling are aware that when you do a burn, you always do a buffer area around your model because fire doesn't stop at boundaries. And in order to accurately see fire behavior, you have to have the whole landscape available for inclusion in your imaginary fire activity. So what we have in this little graph here is we have our treatment areas. So we have 3 treatment areas. And the shadow area is the area where our fire modeling shows us that fire activity has been reduced in severity or even eliminated by our treatments. We'll show the fire modeling in a little bit, but it's known that treatments are made to affect more than just the area around them because they stop contiguous canopies, they stop massive runs, and they also are areas of potential ignition that, if they're done right, are not areas of potential ignition anymore. So you will really see when you run fire models the effect that a treatment has around it, and that is our shadow area. And this protocol allows us to quantify the reduction of carbon emission, not only within our treatments, but within the shadow area. Okay, so within our greenhouse assessment boundary, the pools of carbon we are looking at are standing live and dead trees, shrubs and herbaceous understory, lying dead wood, litter and duff, any harvested wood products in use, as long as they're not stacked, biomass combustion emissions from the dry burns and wildfires, and mobile combustion emissions from heavy machinery used for fuel treatment. So we will be calculating in the emissions created by the treatment itself, by the hauling of materials off the site, and by any grinding or pile burning that could be done on the site. How we quantify them. So the emissions are quantified as the baseline emissions, what would be emitted if that area burned, minus the sequestered carbon, which is the carbon that is carbonate on that area, minus the emissions from the project, and then minus the sequestered carbon from the project. So emission savings has to be greater than the diminished carbon sequestration, and it is in most cases. So we define our treatment area, we put a buffer around it, and then this is just talking about how we delineate it using the computers. I kind of mentioned that already. You will find your shadow area by burning it a few thousand times, and we do that in Flam Map, FSIM, Fire Family Plus, any of those common fire things. So what we see is in the baseline, as growth continues, we're going to actually burn and grow over the entire project in 5-year intervals. So we start here on the baseline is forest that hasn't been mitigated. We're going to grow it for 5 years, burn it for 10 years, burn it every 5 years up to 40 years. The project, we're going to do the same thing. We're gonna take our mitigated model. We're gonna grow it for 5 years. We're gonna burn it. We're gonna grow it for another 5 years, burn it, and we're gonna do that for 40 years. But the prediction is, of course, that these burns in the project are going to be more ground-based. They're going to be more beneficial fires, and they'll be releasing each carbon because in each of these steps in the baseline, it's just more fuel on each burn. So at each step of the project, this is talking about the inputs of a fire model. And we are using the 97th percentile. One reason we're doing the 97th percentile is that NOAA has told us that by the turn of the century, what we call the 97th percentile will be the 90th percentile or even lower because of the increase in the days of red flag days of serious fire weather and the stress on the vegetation. So at each step, we're just kind of like going over it again. Year one, there it is, we grow it, we burn it, and then we actually grow it again. So we use VS to grow between each stage. And there's, of course, a different amount of growth would occur depending upon a fire severity. And then that input helps us create our percent of annual fire risk. The big thing that gives us the percent of our fire risk right here is the fire return interval with Mark McLean, Peter Brown, and I worked on creating a methodology for creating a contemporary fire return interval within Colorado forests using what's going on, the anthropogenic effects upon the land rather than just looking at, say, land fire return interval, which would be based on prehistoric, only on fire ring data. What was the historic and prehistoric fire return interval? We now look at what is the fire return interval based on the fact that people are going to start many of these fires. People are going to suppress many of these fires, but they can only suppress them effectively if they're within a certain area of fire stations and infrastructure. Those will all weigh in on how much effort we're going to put in on suppressing it, how fast we can suppress it, and what is going to be the outcome. So we really need to know what our fire return interval is so that we can look at it in terms of this 40-year span of our project. What are the chances of a fire occurring? Because we have our models, but our models at every step, the fire is 100%. But in reality, it's not. So to give a fair assessment of how much carbon we're actually reducing from the atmosphere, we have to discount it by what is the expected fire return interval. So our quantification goes with, we eliminate the model, we create a model of the forest condition. Currently, our model for the forest condition, our vegetation models, are using the Missoula model, which is coming out of the Missoula Fire Lab, which is much better than the land fire vegetation model. We're using wildfire behavior modeling, which would be that FSIM. Everything. Fire emissions modeling is now coming out of FVS. Related regeneration is coming out of FVS, and the fire ignition probability is our fire return interval. It's our discount on what is the actual probability this is going to happen, and then that gets us to that FMU, the forecasted mitigation unit calculation that we saw before. So I really think you covered it. These guys like I said, do love their death by PowerPoint. So we're just going over again. Yeah, this basically is once again showing how basically your mitigation creates a shadow area by changing the fire behavior over a landscape. And I think we pretty much got that. And really, you know, we're not all scientists here that do not need to be doing this. And the beauty of it is, for all of us, we'll get to this one because this one is kind of important. We standardize it. One of the things we discovered in the many years we've been working on this is it is so complicated. There are so many variables and there's so many ways that you could run these models that we had to standardize it, or otherwise it would be fairly easy to game the system, you know, just by tweaking wind direction and fuel moisture, you know, change everything on model run. So all of those models are going to be run by the registry and by SIG in conjunction with the registry. Even projects say that Cusper Cocoa may develop here in Colorado. We will be having them do the math, but trust me, it's great to have somebody else do the math. And it also means that it's apples to apples across the continental US. We came up with this, John Nickerson of Dogwood Forestry made the first track of this calculation tool for doing it. And then it's been polished up quite a bit by the Climate Action Reserve. But this is how it's calculated, and you can really just put in the project name, put in the acreage, your forest type, and you know, shrub region, sapling input, fire probability, which is your fire return, and it runs equation 6.1, runs year 1 through 5. Then it goes to 6.2, equation 6.3. It goes through all these equations and does it for you. And these are all of the outputs we're going to get. We're going to get the greenhouse emissions from the thinning, from the wood project, slice of bioenergy if it's there. That's for our fossil fuels reduction of replacement by biomass. When we finally get that protocol finished, we'll click into this protocol just like a Lego. If you take your slag and convert it into energy. No residence, all of these are all the things that you're going to see in the next graph. So this is their study case. They started with the baseline. They used the baseline to zero everything out. And then they ran each of these is one of the equations in there to get all of our outputs over our 40 years. This gives us our graph of our carbon reduction of the overall project. That's right here, the net cumulative reduction. And you can see that it's actually, it's positive, which is in our terms is negative. It's mean we're producing negative credits, but we're producing positive amounts of carbon emissions. As the years go by, when we get to 40 years, then it could be occurring depending upon your project, your fuel type, your size, your fire return interval. It could occur, the payback could occur earlier. But what we're looking at is what is the cumulative total. And you can see that we finally get to negative reduction, negative emissions. And so in this case, in the model, the negative emissions was like negative 6.2 tons, 6.5. Oh, I love these guys. 6.5 million grams of carbon dioxide. It's 6.5 tons, guys. That's our reduction. And That's the amount of carbon you will be able to, carbon credits you'll be able to sell per acre. Now, right now, this is rather problematic because on the voluntary carbon market, carbon dioxide is selling for about $10 a ton, which means that you can get $65 an acre towards your project. This is going to change. It's going to change dramatically. Right now in Europe, a carbon offset per ton is around $100. And economists and ecologists tell us that the economic damage of a ton of carbon dioxide released in the atmosphere right now in 2023 is around $250. And this is how much damage is going to be done when all of our cities are underwater, when all of our forests burn down, when all of our infrastructure is toasted. And we have to deal with that when massive populations are displaced. So a ton in the air today is more costly than a ton in the air in 1900 because we're dealing with the straws that are breaking the camel's back. So if this were $100 per ton, then you'd have $6,500 an acre per yeah, $650 an acre, which is a helpful amount of money. And that comes at the beginning in the starting stages. And so this protocol is built not just for today, but it's built to deal with the future. Okay, this is just telling you what I just told you, that this is, what this graph is down here. And we've finally made it to questions, which hopefully you have lots of them. I think I tried to cover it pretty thoroughly and perhaps covered it too thoroughly, but that is our way here. So I'll stop sharing and go back to all your shiny happy faces. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate that. And I find it really interesting what at least carbon credits are worth right now, and hopefully the projection in the future, it keeps going up and up, especially, in light of your last point, that, we could really most likely will face very catastrophic consequences if we don't do something. And so I think that's what we're all struggling with, is really how we're valuing our projects. And it's not just what's happening currently on the ground in an economic sense. It's really an investment into our futures, and really looking at, the ecosystem services that that all this provides. And I think it's, we've been talking about that on our Forest Biomass Utilization Coalition that we have here in Flagstaff. So I just want to say that I found that pretty interesting and revealing, and hoping that we see it trending up as time goes on. But I don't know what you think, if you really think that's going to be the case, or if that's something that we all need to sort of push for.
I think we should all push for it, but I think that it's definitely going to be the case. I mean, this is non-political, this is a scientific judgment, but let's just say that Mar-a-Lago is only 11 feet above sea level. And eventually everybody will understand the scope of the effects that's going on. And as Winston Churchill used to say, Americans always do the right thing after we've exhausted every other possibility. So we will get there, and then we will attack this problem with everything we have. We all wish that people would listen to the wisdom of us and get ahead of the curve. But we just have to stay vigilant, keep working on it, keep plugging away, and have faith that everybody's gonna figure this out, because it's not going away.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Jeff? We have about little bit of time left. We're running a little bit behind, but we probably have time for 1 or 2 questions.
This is really cool, Jeff. I'm curious if there's anywhere else, anywhere that's working with this yet. You know, who is trying this out currently?
They're working on a project in California right now. I haven't talked to them in a few weeks. We've had a couple people come to us in Colorado, and if you were in Colorado, they would send you to us to help you design your project. But like I said, you know, the beauty of it is that all the heavy lifting is going to be done by automatic calculations in computers far away, so we don't have to pull all of our hair out trying to do all this with pencil and paper. Although I did one with pencil and paper because that's just the way I am. Um, it helps me find errors, you know. So
There would be a lot of errors if I did it with pencil and paper. That's great to see this finally get accepted and coming to fruition, and that it can be so automated. You also mentioned the Forest Service's kind of timeline on looking at carbon credits on U.S. Forest Service managed lands. Is that similar with BLM, and do you know anything else on that like timeline of what they're looking at?
I don't know about BLM, and the only reason I know about the Forest Service is because of the conversations that John Nickerson and John Remical have been having with them on this Forest Service and on this protocol. And I think it was, and I rounded it down because it was about 6 months ago when we got the news that the Forest Service, the USDA, was taking at least 2 years to figure out what their stand is on carbon credits, carbon storage, what they should do with it, which is, you know, they would be major beneficiaries of this. And in my opinion, you know, they are stewards of the land, so the people would be major beneficiaries because they hold so many carbon stocks that it could potentially be leveraged into budgets that could help forest health across the entire U.S. So I think that's probably the idea that they'll come up with too, is that, you know, it's everybody's benefit to do this, and especially theirs, because they're there at the whim of Congress themselves on what their budget is. So having other legitimate ways to help in their mission would be, I would think, appreciated.
Well, I hope that made it. I don't know if it made it into the COCO comments to the Mitigation and Management Commission or not, but that seems like a piece to go to there. So, you know, why do we have this hold, and we need to influence at the
Yeah, I
national
don't know.
level.
If John didn't put it in, he's got a strategic reason for it.
Okay.
Anyone else? We got about a minute left, and we're gonna just switch to a few announcements. Jill, did you have something?
Yeah, I did have a quick question. You mentioned that for the thinning operations, that was a residual required of 50 basal area per square feet. And I was wondering if that was just applied for thinning projects, or if that's for any of these projects that you have to have 50 areas, square feet of basal area. And just, I assume that maybe that was a benchmark that you guys found was a meaningful one, but I'm kind of curious about that requirement in general.
Well, it's the result of a lot of arguments. Yes, the argument is that if your basal area is 40, are you really having a forest? But it is the requirement for thinning. Other obviously projects would not have it. There's a potential that you could create a project on grassland with this protocol because of the carbon stores in the vegetation. The regeneration would be a lot greater. You would probably be needing thousands and thousands of acres of grasslands, because I'd be willing to bet that you're only looking at, you know, 1/10 of a ton at the end of a project per acre. But yeah, it's and also any of this is still version 1.1, and any of this is open to discussion with project proponents, depending upon, what is your tree species, what is your terrain, what is your goal, and where did you start at? So it is the rule of thumb as of today, but it's not something that's set in stone. Like I said, there's plenty of people that have been involved in this process that thought that was horse bucky. So
And Ashley also asked what methodology was used to quantify the baseline forest carbon stock.
we use the same methodology. We use the same Missoula tree map in order to do it. We use the same fire models, and we use the same delayed regeneration models. So baseline just begins with, and in here, what we'll do is you'll go in and you'll create monitoring points, and you will take data, and we will use that to ground truth our models within it. And we're still working on multiple different. We did a few up here in Colorado. It was really cool where we did 360-degree photography of basically 1/2 acre plot. So rather than doing a 1/10 acre, we did that a 1/2 acre and put the measurement poles out there for 360 degrees, and then sent to them some guides to see if they could use machine learning and if they could extract the correct species, the correct base height, the correct basal area, and crown density and crown opening from it. Because our 360 were actually semi-spherical. You could see the sky. That method is not there yet at all. But it is something that we're going to continue playing with, because it would just be so sweet if you could just go out like a surveyor, level your tripod at 4.5 feet, put your marking posts out, and then hit a button and move to your next plot.
Yeah, it seems like some of the LiDAR work, I know Anne wants to move us along, but some of the LiDAR work I think that Eli's been doing might have similar application, because they can get very accurate forest type and tree canopy height and all that.
And it's true that LiDAR might eclipse photogrammetry, but right now we're working this because it's cheaper than LiDAR. But LiDAR is getting cheap, isn't it? I think they said the iPhone 14 can do LiDAR.
Wow. That's incredible.
And it's why.
I want to really thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. I think a lot of people are really interested in this. This is really the new wave. And in the few minutes that we have left, I just want to say there are a few new people on here. And if you did not receive the Podio invitation, please type your name and your email into the chat, and we'll get you added to the Podio space. That would be wonderful. Also, I wanted to mention that we're going to be putting together a needs assessment for this wood COP. It's going to be fairly simple and, a very short survey to all of you to really figure out, what everybody wants to focus on and how we move this COP space forward. And we're hoping we'll have that ready for all of you in July. And the other item that we're working on this year is that we're going to develop a resource list, and we're going to do it by category. So say carbon credits as an example, and also as another example, we may, we'll have say I don't know why I'm blanking out, but different categories within the wood utilization process, and then resources underneath each of the categories. So we're going to develop a resource list for that. And then also, if there are any announcements or events, just want to remind you, you can post it on Pody or yourself, or if you'd like, Becca or I could post it for you so we can keep people informed about different conferences and different items, and or if you have agenda items that you would like us to add, or if you know of certain speakers and certain topics of interest, please let Becca and I know. And just wanted to say also on July 27th, that Hansu Pan from the Ecological Restoration Institute will be presenting on an Excel-based model on thinning cost analysis. And that's the 4th Thursday of July. And it will be from 11 to 12 Mountain and 10 to 11 Pacific. That's the same as Arizona time. And so I'm going to stop there. And if anybody else has something to add, we're about a minute over, but if there's just any last thoughts, feel free to jump in.
Well, it's great to see some new names. I just want to say thanks for taking the time and showing the interest in the content today. And we do try to spend a little bit more time just connecting and sharing questions and projects. So please feel free to, you know, use that Podio space or reach out to Ann and I to help get your wood utilization. You know, if you have something you're running into with a project that you want to know what can I do with this wood? Or how do I make this more economical? Keep the conversations going.
Well, thanks, everyone. Good to see everybody, and we'll see you hopefully in July. We'll send out the agenda and a reminder as the date approaches. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.